Hello, this is Rick Shew with Left Shew Politics. We are here in our first post-debate podcast. I'm joined with my co-host, Jeremy Grokley and Michael Malloy. What's up, gentlemen?
Good morning. Glad to be here again.
Morning.
Jeremy, what time is it for you right now?
It is 5:15 in the morning.
Oof, brutal. Jeremy is in Los Angeles for our listeners, and he's being quite a trooper. He's been up since when? 3:30?
About 3:30.
Ouch. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, we have a very special guest today, Mr. Matt Mackowiak. Matt Mackowiak is a Washington, D.C. and Austin, Texas-based political and communications professional and the founder and president of Potomac Strategy Group. Matt is also a former press secretary to 2 U.S. senators and worked for President George W. Bush's administration in the Department of Homeland Security, and then again for President Bush during his 2004 re-election campaign. And I remember that one well. Matt provides political analysis for the Fox News Channel, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, BBC, and he was kind enough to slum it today with a bunch of internet political nerds here on the Left Shew podcast. Matt, welcome, sir.
Hey, my pleasure. Good to be with you.
We really appreciate you being here. You know, first time I ever saw you, Matt, I guess was probably on Meet the Press, and I've seen you on a million things since then. I really enjoy watching you and Chris Hayes chat. I'm a big fan of both of yours, and then obviously you guys are politically on opposite ends of the spectrum, but you guys seem to have a real genuine relationship. I guess you guys met in Austin a few years ago. Is that correct?
Yeah, we met because Chris Hayes came down for the Texas Tribune Festival, which actually just wrapped up again. I think the third version of that. But he came, I think, 2 years ago, and they do a kind of a private kickoff event the night before at a very high demand barbecue joint in Austin called Franklin's. And they usually bring a kind of a well-known person in, and they do a conversation series, and he came in, I think, 2 years ago, and he and I had a chance to meet there. And honestly, I hadn't really talked to him much between there and I don't know, a few months ago, and kind of out of nowhere, I had an opportunity to start coming on his show and talk politics. I've enjoyed the opportunity greatly.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You guys have a really good chemistry on camera together. All right, Matt, so listen, you and I have corresponded last couple of weeks, and you've been kind enough to do that. I was going to lead the question, obviously last night was the big debate, and I was going to reference your op-ed yesterday that you wrote for Observer Media. It was a great op-ed, and your title, your headline here is, Trump can win the first debate by not losing it. In the ratings, all Trump has to do is perform above basement level expectations. So, Matt, did he perform above basement level expectations?
Generally, I've been kind of describing last night's debate as being, Hillary won on points and Trump won on expectations. And I think, I think if you watched that debate and you were grading on substance and policy and knowledge, Hillary was the clear winner. I mean, she's been doing this 30 years. She did actual debate prep. She is a pretty thoughtful person. And to me, it was really just both candidates were kind of a little bit more of what they've been the entire last year, I felt like. I thought Trump succeeded in a couple areas, putting her on defense, particularly as it related to trade, for example, and maybe even on taxes. But for the most part, I thought Hillary had him on defense. And, my guess is Hillary's team probably doesn't feel like there was any question that came up that she didn't do what they all agreed was their strategy. And so in sort of conventional terms, I'm sure they were very pleased. I'm sure the media will say it has said that Hillary won. I think the unknowable question right now is, did Trump sufficiently overperform expectations? Did he clear a bar of sort of credibility to be president? And if he did that, I think he may also gain, even though he wasn't the, quote, winner of the debate. It's a little bit like, a big a large school playing college football against a small school, right? And then the line is 3 touchdowns, and they lose by 1 touchdown. The big school still won, but the small school still overperformed. So it's kind of how I look at last night. I mean, look, to me, Trump needed debate prep more than any presidential candidate in my lifetime. I mean, serious debate prep where he's learning. I don't think that they were prepared at all for what she was going to say and how he should respond. He sort of reverted back to the same things he's been saying. There was almost no strategy whatsoever in what Trump did. But In terms of the expectations game, I think Clinton has been making the case that Trump is temperamentally unfit to be president and that he's sort of unhinged. He didn't appear unhinged last night. There were times where he was being a little bit of a bully, but he was actually reasonably well disciplined and reasonably well self-controlled for what he's capable of last night. And I think that may have come across.
Yeah, he seemed to have wanted to let us know that a couple of times as well.
Right.
For instance, the very last part of the debate when he kind of looked at her and said, I was going to say something really mean about your family, but I'm going to not do that or whatever. And I found that to be a very bizarre.
Well, that shows how he basically. What we were thinking that he was going to do was, when Kellyanne Conway sits him down and says, you just have to keep it all together for 90 minutes. And I was thinking, I heard him say that right there at the end. And I was like, oh, he's going to bring up the Clinton affair thing, the Bill Clinton affair. And I was, as the liberal, I was feeling like, say it. Say it. But then all of a sudden at the last minute, he decided to pull back. And I was almost thinking to myself, maybe out in the crowd, it was like the Trump kids there that were waving him off like, no, Dad, don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah, it almost seemed like he was asking us to congratulate him and thank him for not being completely unhinged. I agree that he wasn't completely unhinged. I think he was a little more unhinged than I expected him to be. I thought he could hold it together a little bit more for the 90 minutes, but he seemed to really take the bait when Hillary was poking him, and he got angrier and angrier as the debate went on.
What do you think of that, Matt? Did he hold it together? I know you just you said that you were kind of impressed with him, in the fact that he at least was quasi-presidential. I'm just parroting, not necessarily your words, but just trying to put this in perspective. But did he sort of start to lose that as the debate went on? Was 90 minutes standing with one person the second half, was that a little too much for him, you think, Matt?
I think it was, and it's funny because I really did have some doubt about whether the length of time, the fact that you're standing, there's no commercial breaks, no bathroom breaks. I actually thought there was a better chance it was going to be a problem for Hillary, but it didn't appear to be. I mean, she was truly resolute and strong and clear-minded really throughout the whole thing. And you're right, I do think there was a big difference between Trump in the first half and the second half, and particularly the first 15 to 20 minutes where he did have her on defense. And if you just look at the way he was speaking in the first 5 or 10 minutes, it was really more of a sort of calm way of speaking for Trump, and that's unusual. It reminded me a little bit of the Mexico appearance with President Peña Nieto, where I sort of expected him to go in there and sort of insult the Mexican people or insult the country of Mexico, and because he didn't do that, he appeared to be more of a statesman. So, look, I think I think that Trump gained a little bit last night, even though there were problems. There's lots of policy problems. You said some silly things at times. But first of all, there's a stature benefit when the less plausible candidate stands next to the more plausible candidate on stage. And so just standing next to Hillary makes people believe that he's more credible than they did going in. And I think that benefited him in Mexico as well. But second, as I come back to it again, I think it's not as much about who was better or who said, who had better policy or who delivered it better, because Hillary was going to win on those scores all along. It was really a question of, did you think Trump was a credible president? Could you vote for him beforehand? And if your answer was maybe or no, did last night make you more likely to say yes? And I think my guess is for 10 or 15 or 20% of the electorate last night, they may have concluded that they could say yes. I still think this is a competitive race. I think the net result is that the slide that we've seen in the polls for Hillary over the last 2.5 to 3 weeks may stop. She may sort of stop the bleeding, and the race may sort of fall into a more stable 2-3-4 point range nationally, which is right on the edge of the margin of error. But what I really want to see is what happens to the battleground states. Those states, the polling in the battleground states has been sharply moving in Trump's direction all over the country for the last 3 weeks. It was up yesterday in Colorado. Nobody could have predicted that. Yes, that's one poll. It may not be correct, but that's what I want to look at, is to see what happens in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, those 3 states over the next 7 to 10 days once the result of this debate kind of sinks in with the electorate and it reflects itself in the polling.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm really interested in viewing as well, is how the debate numbers shift and maybe even how strategy for each candidate shifts in the next 45 days. I think we were able to get a good first view last night of each candidate's strengths and weaknesses on certain issues. I think for me, and Matt, you highlighted as well, the difference that was most highlighted would be something that I would call a competence gap. Whether you agreed with Hillary or not, she just seemed to have a greater command of almost every issue and a better ability to articulate it. So I'm wondering what your impressions were of that, or any of the other specific strengths and weaknesses, and how the debate performance as a whole might change Trump's strategy in the coming weeks, and what he might do differently, how he might address some of those weaknesses to maybe change some people's minds.
Yeah, look, I think Hillary did present herself to be more competent last night. I think there's no doubt about that. I mean, from my standpoint, I wanted to see Trump grow and show that he's been learning, and I think he's almost learned nothing over the past year, which is, truly would require you to sort of deny knowledge.
Right. Well, it requires an admission that he doesn't know now.
Yeah, well, it's even more than that. Literally, you when you're out and about the way he is in several cities, several states, every single day, meeting with, coming across smart people that want to brief you on different issues, that have lots of experience, to not learn anything from those interactions, or at least not have it show itself in what you're publicly saying over time. That in and of itself requires effort. To not be a sponge picking up information and to process it and internalize it and then verbalize it over time. So that to me is a really big problem, and it concerns me greatly. The president should always be learning. Think about how much more President Obama knows now than he did 7 years ago when he started.
Right.
And the same would be true, obviously, for President Bush. So that concerns me. It concerns me that, again, I didn't see any strategy last night from Trump. I think he was effective at making her sort of represent the system, making the point that she's been there 30 years and we still have these problems. But apart from that, there was almost no strategy at all. He was given an absolute softball on cybersecurity. He didn't even hardly make her play any defense on the email issue. He didn't bring up the Clinton Foundation. There were lots of other areas where she would say one thing, which at least would have some substance and some policy to it, but would open her up to a smart rejoinder. Think about Russia. Why not talk about the failure of the Russian reset button and the failure of the Obama administration in terms of its relationships with Russia? There's so many areas where a traditional Republican, if they'd done real debate prep, which every other presidential nominee on our side has done in my lifetime, if you've done that, you work out these scenarios. If the question starts with you on a certain issue, you have a message you want to convey. If the question starts with her, you anticipate what she's going to say, and then you get ready to respond based on what you want to communicate, but also based on what she said. He's either incapable of sort of receiving that kind of strategic advice and letting it affect his thinking, or they just didn't do that at all.
Well, I can't imagine Kellyanne Conway wouldn't have at least tried to do those things. But I agree with almost everything you're saying. I think coming out of the debates, Trump definitely has the most room for improvement. Now, whether or not he can actually seize that ground and make those improvements based on who he is and what he knows and what he's actually capable of, I don't know. I think that even though Hillary hit a higher bar, she's probably got a better ability to adapt and change to what actually happened and move forward with a refined strategy.
Here's a couple questions to build on that. Do you think he is an intellectual? Like, when you're maybe alone in different circles, like, does anyone really in the establishment Republicans really feel that Donald Trump isn't like an intellectual, like he's a really intelligent person able to conquer those sorts of tasks?
Intellectual is not the word I would use, but that doesn't mean that he's not intelligent. I see the words as having slightly different meanings, or maybe different sort of perceptions of what they mean, at least in sort of conversation today. The thing about Trump is, and I've heard this from lots of people, a good number of whom know him or have been with him the past year, and it's a common refrain, and I've heard it from enough people that I feel like it has to be true, and we've all heard it to some extent as well, and that is, he's totally different in private than he is in public. Mm-hmm. And it makes you think that sort of the way that he kind of communicates when he's in public, these rallies and in these interviews, that it's a little bit of a performance, and there's a little bit of a psychological aspect to it. And he's vulnerable, and he's kind of he really wants people to respect him. He wants them to think he's smart. He wants them to think he's very, very, very wealthy and very successful.
Most importantly.
Yeah, right. And so, to your question, he does these roundtables with different groups sometimes in these cities in addition to these rallies. And most of the military and foreign policy people that I know that have been around him say he is pretty smart. He does get what's going on in the world. He does ask good questions, and in these private meetings, he listens almost the entire meeting. And that that would be a side of him I think that people would probably want to see and would think was interesting. And so I don't know why he's incapable of sort of showing that side when he's speaking in public or doing interviews. But I think in some ways when he's in public like that, I think he feels very vulnerable. And he sort of overreacts to that sense of vulnerability, and all of his worst characteristics sort of take over. Right. And we all have strengths and weaknesses. We all have demons we're battling. Generally most of us can kind of keep them in check, and our better angels can sometimes 90 minutes take over. Yeah, but it's not even just about 90 minutes. It's just about over the last year. I mean, you have enough of Trump now in the public domain that you could truly have a psychologist look at it and diagnose what's wrong with him and what he needs. I mean, he appears to be an extreme narcissist. Mm-hmm. He appears to have real issues about self-confidence. I'll bet a lot of this goes back to his dad being very successful. Right. And him realizing, whether he admitted or not, that he kind of was born on third base with his dad, at least in business. He's never been taken seriously in New York, not even among his friends in sort of the real estate titan world up in New York. And, I wrote a long tweet storm, I don't know when that was, 2 months ago, about how we got Trump as the nominee. And I went back to, several tweets in there about the birtherism episode and how he's not only used that to sort of become a national figure, but how that was really conservatism's failure to excommunicate him, much like Buckley did to the Birch Society in whatever that was, the 60s or 70s. And so I think that was a response, though, to him being embarrassed at the White House Correspondents' Dinner by President Obama several months before. So all this stuff, Trump's pretty easy to understand, I think, actually, if you watch him, and it is that he just wants to be respected, and you have to respect the President of the United States, no matter how they got there, no matter what they're doing. The office requires you to respect him, and I think that more than anything else is why he's running.
Well, the office requires you to act respectably as well. So if you want to be respected, you have to act respectably.
And that's just it. And it's going to be really hard for me if he's elected, because I've been saying this lately. I would give John Kasich the presidency right now if I had the power to do that. It could abolish Hillary's chances to get Trump away from the White House, any realm of possibility. I would literally I would give George Bush a third term right now. I'm going to have a really hard time if this guy's elected president, but if he does, I'm going to work really hard to try to respect him, and hopefully maybe he surprises us. But a lot of this analysis that we're giving of him and whatnot, I think one of the reasons I think he's having such a hard time changing, because Matt, you alluded to him, in private being very poised and listen to people, and he's very receptive, but in just this public, this public image of him is just this caricature, this cartoon character. But I think he would say, and has said, but that's what got him here. I mean, he is the nominee for a major political party for president of the United States. And it's by virtue of him basically being a jackass throughout the primary season, and Little Marco and and all the, I don't even want to go down the list because it just kind of makes me ill. But it got him here. And so what does he do to change that is, I think, probably a thing that he struggles with, and I'm sure that it drives Kelly Conway nuts, because he does have to adapt. And when he does try to, for instance, last night, I feel like he looks like a caged animal, and he has to at least let us know that, damn it, I'm brewing in here. There's more I want to say, but I'm just not going to do it. He's a really fascinating character.
Matt, you probably know what generally our opinion is. I'm assuming you do as liberals. This whole Trump phenomenon that we think it was caused by, maybe it's a growing income inequality, right? A growing income gap, a conservative media machine that's gone haywire for 20 plus years. We also think, Republicans in office and the constant obstructionism, it's been eroding Americans' confidence in government over all this time.
The Democrats hold a lot of blame on that too, to be fair.
Well, not to set that, of course, right? It's not. I'm not trying to be intellectually dishonest about some of the failings of government. I'm just taking this just from a general position. Some of our so-called maybe rational conservative friends have to say about Trump. We know what that is, but I guess my question for you is: so you're a professional, you work in this business of politics. Could you shed some light on us? Help, because we do try to wrap our heads around what is somebody else's perspective. How do they end up here? How do so many people listen to Donald Trump and their reaction to it is, yes, that guy is definitely looking out for me? Because honestly, every angle I look at it, I look at him not, he's not even a good con. It's not convincing. It just kind of looks like it's just kind of a caricature, like we're watching kind of a comedic performance. How is it that his message is able to resonate with so many people that somehow us as being progressives are missing?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good question, and I think there's a cultural element to it, and I think there's an economic message to it, element to it. He has a very direct way of communicating that does connect with. It's more likely to connect with non-college educated voters than it is with college educated voters. If you look at the battleground state map, the 3 battleground states where he has done the best, where his performance has been clearly better, have been Ohio, Iowa, and Nevada. Bill McInturf, the NBC News Wall Street Journal pollster on the Republican side, it's been Republican polling forever, has determined that that's because the non-college educated percentage of the percentage of the vote that is non-college educated is higher than it is in all the other battleground states in those 3 states. So if you want to know, sort of why what Trump says resonates, it's because he's resonating with non-college educated voters, and those voters feel economic anxiety, particularly from issues like trade, but also from tax issues and just government, kind of overregulation. They definitely feel like, and this is, their perception, but they feel like illegal immigration is hurting the country, not just from a public safety standpoint, but also from a wages standpoint and from a job standpoint. And so, he has been able to really, I think, with a laser focus, direct his message to that constituency. Now, the problem is that Trump is losing every single demographic that there is except white men.
Except for that one, right?
Right. There aren't enough white men to elect him president. He's going to have to win white women. And, he'll do better with the non-college educated white women, but he's getting absolutely destroyed by college educated white women. And so as you look at what they're doing, to the extent you can apply a strategic frame to any of it, you have to think about what he's doing and what it would do with white women. And that's why Ivanka Trump's proposal about maternity leave was developed. That was aimed directly at white women. That's, I think, a big part of why he's done some of this outreach to the African-American community, going to Cleveland, going to Detroit, going to Flint, doing those things. It's less about the African-American vote, where he's getting 1 or 2%, and more about making white voters believe he's not racist, truly as a strategy. So, I mean, I'm with you to the extent that I see through what he says, and I see the good and the bad. From my standpoint, this is the inherent conflict in the choice that I have as a conservative Republican this November, which is Trump. If I look at it from the Paul Ryan view, he's for Trump because Trump will sign bills that the Republican Congress will pass. Tax reform, perhaps entitlement reform, cutting regulations, building up the military, repealing and replacing Obamacare. These are priorities that President Trump would sign that President Hillary Clinton would veto. And on that basis alone, Ryan and most Republicans at the elected level are on board. Now,
President rubber stamp.
Yeah,
and the Supreme Court is...
Of course, yeah, I didn't even mention the Supreme Court, which is perhaps the single most important issue.
President Pence, we mean.
Now, conversely, you look at Hillary, I think you can almost make an argument from my standpoint that Hillary's going to be more responsible on foreign policy and national security than Trump would be. I think she is I don't want to say a hawk because that's probably an overstatement, but I think she's a pretty responsible Democrat as it relates to foreign policy and national security issues. And so from that standpoint, I have a reasonably high level of confidence in her in that regard. I just happen to think she's going to really kind of double down on the Obama approach over the last 8 years, and we'll get at least 4 more years of that. And I think that's bad for the country, and if you lose the Supreme Court for a generation, from my standpoint, that would be terrible. I have said that I can't vote for Hillary. I haven't said I can't vote for Trump. I'm not never Trump. I'm never Hillary, but I remain an undecided voter, and I've been saying for the last few months that I was really going to watch this first debate and try to make my decision afterwards. And, just from my own perspective, again, I'm not sure that I think Hillary would be a disaster as it relates to foreign policy and national security. I'm very worried about the domestic policy in the Supreme Court. But for Trump, he was a little better than I expected last night because I kind of expected a disaster. But he wasn't good enough, and it will be interesting to see whether he's able to demonstrate any learning and any growth and any better strategy in the second debate, which is a town hall setting with individual voters who are independents and undecided voters asking questions directly of the candidates. I don't know whether he'll be better in that setting, and I think he does need to get better to have a chance to win the election.
I do as well. So if you had to guess right now, you and I were texting the other day about your predictions. Where do you think it stands right now, Matt, before you run, if you don't mind? You had to say right now, definitively, who's going to be the next president?
Yeah, I still think Hillary has, I'd say, maybe a 70 or 75% chance. I think I'd increase it slightly from 60 or 65% after last night. I just think she has all the advantages in terms of the way that we look at politics, right? More money. She's running a better campaign. She's got field staff. She's running TV ads everywhere all the time. She has, she's doing everything campaigns are supposed to be doing. The reason I think you can't rule out that Trump could win is, number one, there could still be a more major development, perhaps something relating to WikiLeaks that could really shake up the race here in the next couple weeks. But also, I think Trump is really running at a time where he has the wind at his back, right? He's a change maker. Or he's the candidate of change in a change election. And you can say Hillary's a lot of things, but it's pretty hard to say she would offer change from what Obama's done in the last 2 terms. So I just wonder if Trump doesn't find a way to just barely find a way to win this thing. But the challenge he has is he has really 1 or 2 paths to 270 electoral votes. The first path includes Pennsylvania. The second path essentially trades 3 states, New Hampshire, Iowa, and Nevada, for Pennsylvania. There's another path where he wins Colorado, but I really don't see that happening. So he has a very narrow path of 270 electoral votes. She has about 15 paths. If she wins Florida, she can lose every other battleground state, and she wins. If she wins Ohio and New Hampshire and loses every other battleground state, she wins. So, she's got lots of different ways. He can win like 5 of 7 battleground states, but without Pennsylvania, he could still lose. So, to me, I just think at the end of the day that her ground game is likely to make up a 1 or 2 point margin to let her perform better than even the polling might show, because he has almost no ground game. Yet all these things together, I'd be really surprised if she loses. But we still do have, 5 or 6 weeks left, and it's been a pretty unpredictable race all along, and I'm sure it'll remain that way.
And Sheldon Addison has a swift boat. I know it. Like he said, I'm saving my money. I think they're saving their money for whatever they think is the big thing they're going to do a couple weeks out from the election, right?
I don't know if it'll be him. I mean, he's really not on board with Trump. He made a $100 million pledge, and so far has only given $5 million, and he's focused more on the Senate. Probably because I think he thinks he's made the calculation that Trump can't win. But I wrote a piece for the New York Observer about 3 weeks ago that laid out 5 October surprises: a health scare, a sharp economic piece of news, WikiLeaks. I'm trying to remember what the other 2 are at the moment. But there's a series of them there. That
I think it's a terrorist attack.
Terrorist attack was the 4th one. Thank you, and I forget what the other one. A major gaffe, right? So. To some extent, I feel like you can't have an October surprise in a cycle this crazy, because we've already had them. There's already been terrorism in New York and New Jersey. We get bad economic news or good economic news, it seems like, every few days. We had a health scare already. Both candidates have had debilitating and disqualifying gaffes all along. And WikiLeaks has been a major player already. So, to some extent, all these surprises have already happened. And with early voting basically already being underway or soon to begin in many states, an October surprise may be too late. You're going to have a third of the electorate that will have voted before Election Day when you add in mail voting, vote by mail, and early voting. We'll see. I still do think Hillary's more likely to win, but to me, it's kind of incredible that Trump has a chance to win at this point. And I think he does have a chance. I think he's got to do better in the final 2 debates. It'll be interesting to see how large the television audience was in the first debate, with predictions being about 100 million. It's very hard to change voter perceptions when that many people saw the same thing, right? I mean, the spin and TV ads are like spinning into the ocean when 100 million people tuned in and watched something. It's like the quarterback in the Super Bowl throwing the interception that lost the game, going on television for 2 months trying to explain why it happened and not take blame for it, right? You just can't do it. So I think last night mattered. Again, the reason I'm really conflicted about what I think the net result will be is, again, I think he did overperform expectations to some extent. I think there's a stature benefit to him being on that stage and being reasonably normal, at least by his standards. But Hillary did everything she wanted to do. Her team has to be ecstatic, and she was very well prepared and very, very competent last night. And honestly, she didn't have to play defense on the issues I thought she was going to have to play defense on. The email thing hardly came up. Clinton Foundation didn't come up at all. She didn't have to detail her own health. She didn't really have to answer too much for the problems she had as Secretary of State with regard to Libya and other issues. So from that standpoint, they must be ecstatic, and I think they deserve to win last night because they prepared as a professional campaign would, and Trump's campaign did not.
Well, Matt, we promised our listeners and our readers that we were going to book a conservative on our show, and man, did we hit a home run. You're awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. And before you run, please give us a quick plug. What do you have going on today? I see that you have an op-ed on Hill.com that live today. Anything else? What's your next article going up? What's your next TV appearance? What's going on?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. I mean, people can always follow me on Twitter. I'm just at Matt Mackowiak, and the last name is Mackowiak. I do have columns in the Hill and in the New York Observer pretty regularly. The Hill is just a small, quick analysis from 5 or 6 different analysts, and I'm part of that. But I will have a longer piece in the Hill about the debate, and also have one in the New York Observer. So those are 2 places where you can find me. But I always put all my stuff on Twitter, and that's a good place to start.
To all you liberals out there, it is wise to open your mind and your hearts to very smart conservatives and listen. And Matt's one of those guys you really need to follow. And even if you disagree with him, he will reinforce your original belief, which at the end of the day, that's gold in itself. Matt, thank you so much.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Appreciate it, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Matt.
Great talking.
Take care, Matt.
Take care, guys. Enjoyed it. See ya.
All right.
Man, that's really cool of Matt to jump on with us. Hey, do me a favor, Jeremy. Please tell me the name of his group.
Potomac.
Cannot get that word out.
No, you cannot.
The Potomac.
You can't say my last name either, but that's all right.
Say Potomac. Anyway, so to our listeners out there, he is the president of the Potomac Strategy Group.
Look at you.
There you go.
Potomac.
Learning and adapting, better than Trump.
What did you guys think, man? I thought that was really cool of him to come on the show.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great conversation. It was interesting to get his perspective, and it was interesting that somebody who is so hardline conservative, such a huge George W. Bush fan, has a lot of the same impressions of Trump that we do, and is just really struggling with whether or not he can put this man in, or help to put this man in the Oval Office, just because he also supports many of the same ideological conservative things that he does, just because he'll rubber stamp any bill that comes out of a Republican Congress.
Well, I think if I was in his spot, I kind of threw that in there, but Trump campaign had thrown it out to John Kasich, said, hey, you want to be the most powerful vice president ever? Obviously, he turned them down, and then Pence is the one that got the job. So in some respect, that maybe he's not completely off base, because pretty much all of the policy decisions are probably going to be Mike Pence, just because Trump doesn't, I don't think, really cares too much to have to deal with that.
Scary. That's alarming, because
it's even more alarming. Yeah.
But I think you're right. Pence knew, though, that he's not ever getting it out of Indiana. You know, Indiana is the ceiling for Mike Pence, governor of Indiana. He didn't have any other road to the Oval Office as a vice president or a president, whereas John Kasich has other options. He can get there on his own.
I really am getting a little frustrated with the Clinton campaign in regards to Mike Pence. He is getting a pass right now, and we are just weeks away from this election. This guy is a bona fide homophobe.
Yeah, well,
Period.
There's a CP debate coming up, so they're gonna have some more focus. But nobody votes based on who vice president is. I mean, very few people.
They don't. People say that all the time, and I think there's a little bit more to it than people give it credit for. Otherwise, why would candidates still, to this day, make a big deal about it, have a big roll out of it? Doesn't matter.
Because they get caught up in the regular conventional wisdom. But
yeah, they're hoping to win one extra state or something. They're hoping if I can get John Kasich, I get Ohio. I mean, to me, Indiana was the worst state that he could have picked somebody from. He was going to carry Indiana no matter what.
Well, at the end of the day, it's still about who you align yourself with, and you are guilty by association. And when you pick a vice president who signed a vile, homophobic, gay-hating bill as governor of Indiana, that needs to be discussed. that needs to be discussed. We millennials right now, we're losing them. I want to go on a little rant about that for a moment, if you guys don't mind. What is going on with millennial voters? And if you're listening, I'm going to say this, and I know that I should probably maybe be more delicate in my approach with this, but I have no patience. I'm worn out on this right now, and all I can say is, how is it that so many of these guys have left us? And by the way, side note, this is what could cost us the election. Just, I hope we're all aware of that. The millennial vote, she's only winning by like 10% right now. She should be winning by 85%.
99%.
If it
99%.
If it was the issues that millennials actually care about, global warming, right? They're deniers of global warming. Everybody on the conservative movements is a denier of global warming these days.
But they're not going for Trump. This is the issue, though. The issue is that they're going to Gary Johnson, and that sliver of the vote, man. When you talk about a close election, 8%, 7%, that can change things. I mean, look at 1992. George Bush lost re-election because of Ross Perot, not because of Bill Clinton.
Well, Ross Perot got 26% of the vote or something.
Well, that's true. He did get a much higher percentage than Gary Johnson's going to get. But what my point still stands is that a third-party candidate can shift an election, and that one was even more difficult to pull off. He had to be that high because we had an
right. But third-party candidates always poll better than they actually perform.
Yes, in normal years. I don't know if this is a normal year. And here's the problem. These guys are angry about Bernie Sanders and the way the DNC treated him. So now they're going to Gary Johnson as their middle finger. And if more WikiLeaks emails come out, which they are, and they're probably going to be rather egregious when it comes to how Bernie was treated, I can only imagine that's just going to make things worse. So that's in their back pocket right now.
Well, I think millennials are actually pretty smart. They're actually pretty thoughtful, a thoughtful group of people, and I think ultimately it's going to come down to a recognition that I can cast a protest vote and maybe end up with this person in the White House who doesn't support any of the ideas that I support, but will do everything that he can to roll back the progress that has been made on the ideas that I support. Or I can actually vote for somebody who does support a vast majority of what I want and get some progress at least on those things. And then if she lets us down, we can vote for somebody else in 4 years or 8 years. But ultimately, as we get closer, I think that people are going to come to their senses and have a more level head about who they're voting for and not be so reactionary. And they're going to vote for who actually is on the ballot as opposed to a protest vote against who's not on the ballot. You know what I mean?
Well, and going back to what I was originally going to say, to come full circle with this, that when they go from supporting a big government quasi-socialist to a anti-government almost, definitely small government, isolationist like Gary Johnson, it worries me that policy wasn't really what was driving this thing to begin with. So hopefully you're right. I just wanted to kind of vent about that for a moment.
Well, the good news is, Rick,
Rick?
Michael? The reason why she's going to get a big bump from this, not just because she outperformed him, because the difference is Hillary Clinton just cannot draw that much of a television audience when she's by herself. And so most everything that the general public that's not like the big political watchers, they consume the bullshit, right? But just like after the convention, got her on stage, let her talk, kind of say her vision, and we're like, oh, wow, that's actually pretty good. And the same thing happened last night. Once you're listening to the actual Hillary Clinton, not the caricature of her, that is definitely what's going to drive the polls. So the question is, I know they've already committed to it. Is the Trump campaign really going to show up for the next debates? Because, the worst thing that they can do is to put Hillary on a stage next to him. You know what I mean? When she has that television audience, it can do nothing but benefit her unless somehow, I don't know what the gaffe could possibly be. She's too good at this.
Yeah, well, I think he'll show up for at least one more debate. But if he does not perform well there, then he won't show up for the third.
What a perfect time to do our famous predictions to wrap up the show. Is that your prediction, Jeremy?
That is not my prediction, no.
All right, so why don't we do that? So predictions, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think that, Matt kind of touched on it as well, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the polls in the coming weeks. It's really hard to predict because I think it's possible that the polls don't change at all, and I think it's possible that Hillary gets an 8-point bounce coming out of the debate. I think the latter, though, is more likely and probably what we're going to see in the next week to 10 days, the next 2 rounds of polls that come out, is that things will trend back in Hillary's direction, especially in states like Colorado and Florida. And she'll probably have somewhere between an aggregate, 4 and 6 point lead in the national popular vote polls, and her path to the Electoral College victory will look a lot more clear.
I think that's a very good prediction, actually. I think you're right. Mr. Malloy?
All right, so maybe things changed a little bit on my prediction since last night, because she did have a pretty stellar performance. I think she's going to get a bounce. My concern and my prediction is if the polls turn back towards Trump's favor and we're getting this close to the election, the next scare that we are going to have is that there is going to be a massive drop in the stock market. The Dow Industrial Average is going to plummet because it's going to create economic insecurity around the world, and in a weird, horrible twist, it could actually end up benefiting Trump. So I guess my prediction is if polls turn back to Trump's way in a couple of weeks, there's going to be somewhat of a financial scare, and it's going to benefit him tremendously, and it's going to put the Democrats back on edge about who's about to become elected.
I don't think they're not off the edge or the ledge now. So hopefully they're not. They shouldn't be taking anything for granted. Not even after last night. There's a lot of work left to be done.
Agreed.
My prediction is this. I think Trump is going to win Ohio, Iowa, and he may even win Florida, and he's still going to lose the election. This is madness. It's a crazy election, everyone. It really is. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Left Shew Politics podcast. You can find us on Twitter @LeftShewPolitic, Facebook at facebook.com/LeftShewPolitics. Search for our channel on YouTube, and you can find us on the LSP website, LeftShewPolitics.com.